For nearly half a century, Amtrak's double-decker trains have carried America across deserts, through mountains, and between small prairie towns. They're the Superliners, the backbone of Amtrak's long-distance network, but now the paint is fading, the steel is corroding, and the clock is ticking down. Rust cracks and aging systems threaten the very soul of American rail travel. We've already seen Amtrak retire its Horizon cars. Could the same fate be waiting for the Superliners? So what happens when these legendary trains stop running, and more importantly, what will replace them? Find out in today's episode of On the Trains. Superliner train status. Born in the mid-1970s, the Superliner is more than just a train car. It's a symbol of the rebirth of American rail in the post-war era. The first Superliner I cars were built by Pullman Standard and delivered between 1975 and 1981, followed by the Bombardier Superliner II from 1991 to 1996. In total, Amtrak owns about 380 Superliner cars, making up its largest double-decker fleet. These trains operate on most long-distance routes, especially west of the Mississippi River, where low-level stations complement the Superliner's distinctive design. From the California Zephyr to the Empire Builder, the Southwest Chief to the Coast Starlight, the Superliner has been the lifeblood of transcontinental travel, carrying the memories, sights, and stories of millions of passengers for nearly half a century. But that legacy is fading. Much of the fleet is now over 40 years old, with the original 1970s cars hitting the 50-year mark by 2025, a significant increase over their original design life. The steel frames are starting to corrode, the electrical and air conditioning systems are outdated, and many cars do not meet ADA standards for people with disabilities. Step into an old Superliner and you can feel the past is still here. The stained wood paneling, faded seat fabrics, and the distinct smell of metal mixed with the cold air from old air conditioning all take you back to the 1980s, when rail travel was still a romantic journey. But behind that nostalgic look are problems that cannot be hidden. Many Superliners have served millions of miles, endured harsh weather, and have never been fully overhauled. Electrical systems malfunction regularly, air conditioning is loud, windows are fogged up with moisture. Some sleeping compartments are no longer airtight, forcing passengers to bring extra blankets in the winter. Amtrak engineers work tirelessly to keep these trains running, replacing every piece of metal, every circuit board, every outdated HVAC component. But they also know each repair is only a temporary solution. The Superliner was once the pride of Amtrak, the symbol of trips across America. Now many of these trains are just tired warriors that still run, still serve, but cannot resist the law of time. With the deterioration becoming more serious, Amtrak was forced to start looking for a new generation of trains to replace. So what has Amtrak done for the Superliner when it faces the same cancellation threat as the Horizon? I'll go into more detail about Amtrak's plans in the next section. And be sure to subscribe to our channel for more information like this. Thank you. Amtrak's replacement plan. Replacing these trains isn't a one-way street. In 1979, Amtrak was forced to cancel routes like the Floridian because the maintenance costs of its aging cars became too high. This time, the company is determined not to let that happen. In 2017, then Amtrak CEO Richard Anderson spoke about the urgency of replacing the Superliner, but the process has taken too long. Until 2022, Amtrak began planning for a new generation of trains, one of the most ambitious projects in American rail history. The company issued requests for information to manufacturers around the world to solicit design ideas for a brand new double-decker car. A year later, in 2023, Amtrak entered the request for proposal phase, formally inviting bids for the long-distance fleet replacement project. By the end of 2024, only 2 manufacturers had submitted full proposals, and both are still under review. Amtrak hopes to select a manufacturing partner in 2025-2026, start production, and have the new generation of cars in service by the early 2030s. Through the LDFR program, Amtrak is undertaking the largest equipment purchase in terms of cost and volume in its history, an unprecedented overhaul. Backed by up to $7 billion in funding from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the initiative is seen as an effort to revitalize America's long-distance rail industry, reshaping service experience and performance for decades to come. The goal is clear: replace hundreds of aging Superliners and single-decker cars that have been in service for nearly half a century. The first phase will provide next-generation double-decker cars for 9 of Amtrak's 15 long-distance routes, including the California Zephyr, Empire Builder, Southwest Chief, and Coast Starlight. As of October 2023, Amtrak's long-distance fleet consisted of 765 cars across 5 different generations, many of which were already well past their design life. In fiscal year 2023, 3.9 million passengers traveled on long-distance routes, just 14% of total passenger volume, yet they generated more than 25% of Amtrak's ticket revenue. Though not highly profitable, these routes remain the cultural backbone of American travel, connecting people and places that no airline or highway could ever replace. The new generation of train cars is expected to retain the signature double-decker design, but deliver a far more modern experience: higher speeds, smarter air conditioning, convenient power outlets, stable Wi-Fi, and especially improved accessibility for people with disabilities. Amtrak believes that when the next generation of Superliners officially debuts in the early 2030s, passengers will experience a new era of smooth, comfortable, and distinctly American rail travel. Because replacing the Superliner isn't just a technical upgrade, it's a rebirth. It's Amtrak's way of making sure long-distance rail doesn't fade into memory but keeps rolling proudly into the future. But to make that vision a reality, Amtrak faces a series of technical, financial, and political challenges. Delays and challenges. If Amtrak had a plan, why did it take so long? First, there was the engineering problem. Designing a brand new double-decker train to fit on America's aging rail system was a nightmare. Every inch of height, every pound of weight, every curve in the frame mattered. These trains had to go through tunnels built in the 1940s, glide under low bridges, and stop at platforms that varied in elevation from state to state. One small design flaw and the entire train might not even be able to pass through some parts of the country. And then there was the Americans with Disabilities Act. The law requires full access for all, including elevators between floors. That sounds fair and necessary, and it is. But imagine putting an elevator on a double-decker train without making it heavier, taller, or unbalanced. It's like trying to fit a refrigerator into a camper that's both cramped and difficult to operate. We found that adding an elevator to the design significantly increased overall weight, reduced interior space, and required the frame to be re-engineered. This directly impacted fuel efficiency, cornering stability, and even long-term maintenance costs. Amtrak engineers are still struggling to find a solution that is both safe and ADA compliant without sacrificing the inherent flexibility of the Superliner. Then there's the industry issue, and that's a big one. America used to have companies like Pullman and Bombardier that could build giant double-decker cars. But that's long gone. Now most of that expertise is gone, and the few companies that can do it are overwhelmed by other contracts like commuter rail and Amtrak's own Aero project. And under Buy American regulations, Amtrak must import most of its materials, parts, and labor from the United States. It sounds patriotic, yes, but it also means higher costs and fewer suppliers. Like trying to build a house when your local lumberyard runs out of wood, everything slows down. And of course there is politics. Every dollar Amtrak spends must be approved by Congress. Some lawmakers argue the money should go toward operations or maintenance rather than new trains. Others argue that long-distance routes aren't worth the investment at all. Meanwhile, western states where the Superliner remains the only route connecting towns are pushing for a replacement. It's a tug-of-war between regions' budgets and priorities. And until everyone agrees, Amtrak can't move forward. So the big question now is, can Amtrak meet that goal before the deadline? Because every year the Superliner gets a little older, a little noisier, and a little closer to retirement. And so what happens if Amtrak fails to replace this aging Superliner fleet? The answer is simple. America's entire long-distance rail network will cripple. The cars that once roamed the continent are aging, maintenance costs are skyrocketing, and spare parts are becoming increasingly scarce. Amtrak will be forced to cut service, run fewer trips, run fewer cars, and sometimes completely eliminate long-distance routes. The consequences will not only be felt by passengers but also by the tourist economy of small towns where Amtrak trains are the last link to the rest of the country. If this continues, Amtrak may have to stop operating iconic lines like the California Zephyr or the Empire Builder. America will lose more than just a means of transportation, but a piece of its memory, a piece of its culture. Historical origins. Introduced in the late 1980s, they were built to replace the company's aging fleet with something lighter, faster, and easier to maintain. Bombardier Transportation designed them based on the proven Comet commuter coach, a model already popular with regional rail lines across the United States. Amtrak even considered calling them Amfleet III, but their square industrial look was a departure from the rounded aircraft-inspired Amfleet coaches. The Horizon marked a new beginning for Amtrak's short-haul modernization efforts. Built with an aluminum body on a steel frame, each Horizon coach is lighter than most Amfleet coaches. This makes them faster, more fuel-efficient, and easier to handle on short and medium-haul routes. Inside spaciousness, large windows, and reliable air conditioning provided passengers with a smoother, quieter ride that was truly new to American intercity travel at the time. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, Horizons became a familiar sight across the Midwest and Pacific Northwest, operating routes like the Hiawatha Cascades and later the Downeaster. Even as other fleets aged, Horizons continued to operate. Many were refurbished in the late 2010s with new interiors and upgraded electrical systems. In theory, they were ready for another decade of service, but the simplicity that made them so effective became their biggest weakness. Thin materials, lightweight frames, and basic welds benefit in cost and performance, but are vulnerable to age, moisture, and corrosion. After 30 years of service, those outdated designs are finally catching up. By early 2025, inspectors began to find severe rust under the floors and around key joints. As they dug deeper, the problem became more serious than expected. Within weeks, Amtrak had made its decision the entire Horizon fleet would be grounded. The question was, what's the problem? We'll find out in the next section. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for daily train updates. The real issue. When Amtrak abruptly retired all of its Horizon cars, the company offered only a brief explanation: safety concerns. But within the rail community, many already knew the truth. The real problem wasn't a sudden failure, it was something that had been building quietly for decades. Amtrak's Horizon cars were never designed for long-distance service. They were based on the Comet commuter coach, lightweight, simple, and low maintenance, perfect for short commuter trips, but never intended for the rigors of interstate travel. When Amtrak bought them in the late 1980s, the goal was speed and economy. The company needed new cars quickly, and the Horizons fit that bill. For a while, they worked beautifully light, fast, and comfortable, but after more than 3 decades, time and neglect took their toll. Unlike commuter agencies like Metro North SEPTA or NJ Transit, which still operate similar cars today, Amtrak didn't give its Horizons the same level of care. While other agencies routinely inspected and repaired their trains, Amtrak often deferred maintenance or skipped detailed inspections to save costs. Problems slowly developed beneath the floors and behind wall panels, hidden from view until corrosion became too severe to repair. The Horizon's design itself wasn't inherently flawed. Its aluminum body was mounted on a steel frame, a clever way to reduce weight while keeping structural strength. But when those two metals meet, moisture or salt galvanic corrosion begins to form. Over time, aluminum starts to degrade where it contacts steel, especially in humid or coastal environments. The worst part, it happens from the inside out. By the time the damage becomes visible, the structure is already dangerously weak. Inspectors found that some cars had deteriorated so badly they could no longer safely carry passengers. Joints had thinned, floors had warped, and undercarriage beams had holes eaten straight through by rust. Even minor vibrations at high speed could risk structural failure. Other agencies faced the same issue years earlier. In the early 2000s, Metro North discovered similar corrosion in its Comet 2 cars. Instead of retiring them, they cut out the damaged sections, reinforced the structure, and added insulation between metals. Those cars are still safely in service today. So the issue wasn't that the Horizons were poorly built, it was that Amtrak failed to maintain them properly. Many cars were left for years in wet storage yards exposed to rain, snow, and de-icing salt. Tiny rust spots turned into major structural decay. And all the while, these trains were being pushed far beyond their original design, from short commuter runs to long, demanding intercity routes across multiple climates. It's a familiar pattern: short-term savings that lead to long-term costs. As of today, about a dozen Horizon cars are reportedly being worked on at Alstom's Hornell facility in New York, undergoing repairs and testing. The rest sit idle across the Midwest, quietly rusting away under tarps or open skies. If all goes well, a few refurbished Horizons might return to service in 2026 or early 2027, but by that time, Amtrak's new Siemens Aero trains will already be running, turning the Horizon's return into more of a farewell tour than a comeback. Ultimately, the Horizon story isn't just about corrosion or aging metal, it's about how decades of underfunding and inconsistent maintenance can wear down even the best-built machines. Trains don't just die because they're old. They die because no one took care of them. However, the Horizon shutdown hasn't come without consequences, causing real challenges across Amtrak's network. The consequences. When the Horizon fleet was grounded, disruptions rippled across the Amtrak network, affecting several key corridors. The Borealis was hit hardest. The brand new line set to open in early 2025 between Chicago and Minneapolis-St. Paul was supposed to represent Amtrak's foray into autonomy in the Midwest. With a strong brand, strong ridership, and growing enthusiasm, the line was expected to be a success. Then came the shutdown. Without the Horizon, Amtrak had to lease buses to replace the 1333 northwestbound and 1340 east-southbound. For weeks, passengers were forced to take long-distance buses instead of trains because the new line was grounded. On March 28, the Borealis trains 1333 and 1340 were finally restored, although some other service remained suspended indefinitely. Business-class passengers are being refunded the difference in fares as the temporary double-decker trains in use no longer have business-class seating. The situation is even worse on the Amtrak Cascades between Seattle and Eugene. Only 2 trains, 503 and 508, are still running, the last remaining Talgo trains on the line. Amtrak's website still displays the full schedule, but passengers cannot tell which trains are running and which are being replaced by buses. Many departures are marked as sold out, even though no trains are running. Passengers have to wonder whether Amtrak has enough rail cars to meet demand. The Hiawatha between Chicago and Milwaukee seems a little more important. On March 27th, some scheduled trains were back in service. By March 31st, Amtrak announced that the entire Hiawatha schedule had been restored, although it was unclear whether the cars would be used for continuous service. Finally, the Downeaster line, which runs between Boston and Brunswick, Maine, saw slightly fewer trips but no significant disruptions. The Horizon car was removed from the fleet, shortening its running time but keeping its entire schedule intact. Overall, the disruptions underscored Amtrak's continued reliance on older equipment. When one train fails, the ripple effects can cripple routes hundreds of miles apart. The road ahead. The Horizon's demise is not just a story of maintenance, but also a reflection of Amtrak itself, a company constantly forced to balance ambition and survival. For more than 30 years, these cars have carried millions of commuters, families, students, and tourists across the Midwest and beyond. But even reliable machines cannot survive neglect. Amtrak's future now depends on Siemens RO trains, the next-generation fleet set to replace the Horizon and Amfleet. These new trains promise greater energy efficiency, faster acceleration, and improved comfort. They represent everything Amtrak hoped for in the 1990s, but with modern technology and materials to match. But new trains alone won't solve the core problem. Without regular maintenance, reliable financing, and a clear long-term vision, even the best technology will eventually meet the same fate. Railroads don't collapse overnight. They slowly deteriorate, bolt by bolt, joint by joint budget, cut by budget cut until it's too late to turn back. The lesson from Horizon is clear and painful. It's not just about building trains, it's about caring for them. American passenger rail deserves stability, not stopgap solutions or short-term savings. If Amtrak can learn from this, the Aero fleet could mark a true rebirth of American passenger rail, one based on reliability, innovation, and pride. But if history repeats itself, Horizon's quiet demise may just be a harbinger of another generation of trains lost to time. Well, that's it for today. See you next time.